I'm Hunter Atkins, Chairman of the Board of the Bank of Nashville. The Bank of Nashville has presented now 14 episodes of the CEO Cafe that bring relevant topics to the business community in Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Today we have a panel of 3 amazing women who have each been successful as entrepreneurs. The 3, Gina Butler, Sherry Deutschman, and Beth Chase, form a panel that will be moderated by PaulaLovell of Lovell Communications. I think their stories will intrigue everybody who tunes in, and again, thank you from the Bank of Nashville for being part of the CEO Cafe.
Good morning. My name is Bill Nye, and just on behalf of the Bank of Nashville, I'd like to welcome all of you here. This is a great group for our first CEO Cafe of 2011. I think Ann told me it was a record. So we're excited. We're thankful that you're here, and I think we've got a great program this morning thanks to these wonderful ladies. So I'm going to turn it over to Roddy, and he's going to take us through some of the program introductions.
First of all, y'all should feel good. Y'all are in a select crowd. This is the biggest, smartest, and best-looking group we've ever had. I'd like to introduce Hunter Atkins, who's our chairman of the bank. There's Hunter right there. And Livingston, who puts us all on, along with eSpaces and Kim at MEAC and Jim. Where are y'all? And I'd like to introduce 2 of our directors, Gary Parks, who is here. Gary. Last time I missed Gary and I had to report to him to get things straightened out. And Joe Fetterspill. Joe. Thank y'all very much. Thanks again to eSpaces for putting this on. The first time I came out here, I was like, what? But when I saw it, I understood the significance of this place. It is awesome. So anyone's interested, this is a wonderful place, and Phil and his crew will be glad to give you some info. On the way out, we have some coasters for y'all to take home with you or take to your office. Just take them somewhere and show them off. And we have DVDs of the prior episodes. Once again, thank y'all. We started this as a pilot about 3 or 4 years ago. Jim Fuller came to us with the idea. We said, let's try one, and this is our 13th, and it is growing with great momentum thanks to our guests that are going to help us today and y'all for attending. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Jim Fuller.
Thank you, Rodney. We appreciate the Bank of Nashville being involved in this. They've been the founding sponsor and the continuing sponsor from the very beginning. It is a contribution to the business community of Nashville that they've had this continuing commitment, and their commitment individually to the individual entrepreneur, and folks like Gigi's Cupcakes can testify to the kind of banking support, and there's others in the room that I have clients here that have been with the bank from the very beginning, but they've been with this program from the very beginning, and we appreciate their commitment. Roddy and Hunter and Bill and particularly Ann Livingston, now that she's in charge of the CEO Cafe, have been delightful to work with. And I think you'll have the same experience if you decide to choose a bank. So we recommend them. And as far as the space here, eSpaces, Phil is back in the back here. Phil Gibbs is the founder of this. If you haven't had a VIP tour of this, you ought to. And just like it was said originally, one of the bank board members said, technology is up to the point that you can operate out of the back seat of your car nowadays. You just don't want to have business meetings there. This is the place to have business meetings. So welcome to all of you, and thank you to eSpaces and to the bank for making this possible. We've got one of the best programs that we've ever had, and these are 4 incredible individuals back here that you're going to enjoy getting to hear. CEO Cafe was called a cafe so that it would be more of a conversation than a speech or a presentation. So we're expecting you to participate. And when you hear these 4 individuals, and I'm including Paula in the group, so you can ask her questions too, but we have 3 panelists. If you can't think to ask one of them a question after you hear about them, we're not going to let you come back. Gina Butler is the founder of Gigi's Cupcakes. I drove all the way from here to Cool Springs for 2 reasons: to meet her and to have a cupcake, and they were both delightful experiences yesterday. So, but when you talk about entrepreneurs, her mama, Ann, is here, right? Raise your hand. She says this was an entrepreneur from early on. They had a little garden, and she'd put the garden products in the wagon and go around the neighborhood selling them. And when she was 15, bought a mop and a bucket and started a cleaning company. And a few years ago started Gigi's Cupcakes, and it's had incredible growth. And I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'll let her tell you about the incredible growth. Sherry Deutschman is the founder of Letter Logic, which has not only had a phenomenal 8-year growth, and I'll again let her tell you about it, but has one of the most impressive corporate cultures and employee-centered atmospheres I have ever heard about in my life. I'll let her tell you about it, but you will be impressed. Beth Chase comes to us from IBM, founded her own business consulting and IT consulting company, C3, that is right in the corridor of the Davidson County IT healthcare explosion that we're having here, and has been involved with the Entrepreneur Center downtown and helping encourage that, and the Technology Center, and is on the cutting edge of keeping companies in this area on the cutting edge of technology, particularly healthcare. So you will want to hear from her. Her company's growth is impressive. Now, one thing I noticed when I went back and looked at family photos was, as a father, I did the picture taking, and I was never in any of the pictures. That happens to moderators, and so we're not going to let Paula get away with that this morning. Her company, Lovell Communication, is one of the most successful public relations, corporate communications companies in the area, maybe in the state, but she's nationwide, has an impressive array of clients nationwide. I kidded her a few minutes ago and said if the BP chairman had hired her at the beginning of the oil spill, he might still have his job, but she does crisis communication and communication between companies, business to business and business to employees, and is the best you've ever seen. But unlike startup companies, she's into her 3rd decade of being a successful company, has had to recreate and adjust with the times. So I'm going to turn things over to Paula. She's going to moderate and interview the panel, but before she does, I'm going to ask her to share her story with you. Her company's success, what kinds of things she attributes that to. Is it employees? Is it philosophy? Is it corporate culture? What is there unique about her company when a lot of companies don't make it even into their 2nd year, that she's made it well past her 20th year? And when you get ready to reinvent yourself, how does that take place? And I know we've got a lot of new entrepreneurs here and entrepreneur wannabes here. Folks who have started their company in the last 2 or 3 months, and folks who are thinking of starting their company, and others that are running their company. Any advice that she would have for any of you, I'd like for her to share with us. So I'll turn things over to Paula, and let's give all of them a big round of applause before we start. Before I hand the microphone to Paula, I did want to make one other observation. We have two special guests up here. Mercedes Jones was in charge of all the Schermerhorn project, which was impressive, started her own company, and her mama is here, who was one of the first female contractors in the state of Tennessee and is the only one in the Tennessee Hall of Fame for builders. And so let's give both of them a hand for being here.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was a very gracious introduction. And this room is filled with excitement. I mean, there's so much energy here. So I just want to ask, how many of you are entrepreneurs, have started a business at some point? Wonderful. How many of you are contemplating starting a business? Hands go up. They stay a little lower. I know about that fear factor, but it's a real driver, the fear. I'm happy to be here, and I want us to get some advice from this audience as well as from our fabulous panel. I'm really impressed with all three of these women who I've known from a distance and some closer than others. They are roaring successes. Jim asked me to tell you a little bit about my company, and first I'll say that Lovell Communications manages brand reputation for companies. We grow and start companies and help them through marketing communications. This is my second career. I was a reluctant entrepreneur. I was raised in a family of corporate America, where everybody I knew had been with a corporation for 40, 50, 60 years. I never expected to be an entrepreneur, but it is the best thing I ever did for myself and for my family. I had a career. My business is 23 years old. I had a career prior to that. I was a writer in television, and I worked for the sister station to CNN, WTBS. I worked for Channel 4 here in Nashville. Worked for ESPN through a show in Baton Rouge, and I worked for a great show called PM Magazine, that some of you may remember. So I did that for about 20 years. And then I had a life-changing personal event, and it caused me to reassess things. And as I was sitting around with in addition to the life-changing event, I also had a son, a new baby, which is life-changing in and of itself. And I was sitting around wondering what I was going to do during this short period. And a college sorority sister of mine came to me and said, you know, I work for a great ad agency here in town. We'd like you to come over and start our PR division. And I said, what's PR? And she said, well, you know those articles you write for magazines and for newspapers? I said, sure. She said, you just do the same thing, but you write the word press release at the top. Well, that's not what PR is, but I didn't know any better. So I said, sure, that sounds like I can do that. I went to the firm, and I stayed there a couple of years. And I decided, for a variety of reasons, that, guess what, I wanted to be a partner. But the firm had 4 partners, and I went to them and said, hey, you know, I'd really like to be a partner. And this, by the way, was after the CEO had come to me and said, way to go, Paula. Just want you to know in the first 8 months, you've taken our revenues up 600%. And I was like, yes, leverage. So I said, hey, how about making me a partner? Well, long and short of it, they didn't want to, because there were 4 partners. And that is also the best thing that ever happened to me. So I thought about it. I did some research. I put together a little business plan, and then I went to them and I said, look, I'd like to start my own firm, but I want you to know I'll stay here a year, 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 months, and I'll transition every single client over to you, and we'll not take a single client. And they said to me, you be gone by 4:30 this afternoon. So, having prepared for that, I did leave, go across the street, went into the basement of a bank, and that was the beginning of Lovell Communications. 23 years later, we are still in the same building on the 3rd floor. I call it the penthouse, in a little more space. And we have clients in 45 states, specialize in healthcare, transportation, education, banking, and finance, and do about 50% of our work in crisis communication. So that's the story behind Lovell Communications. And I want now to talk to some of our really special guests and our panelists. And I'm going to start with you, Beth, and ask if you will tell us in a few minutes about your firm, your story, and then we'll move on.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you for having me this morning. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I went to Vanderbilt, actually grew up in Kentucky, went to Vanderbilt, and I've been here now for 30 years. So when I say that, it makes me sound so old, and I still feel very young. But I started my career with IBM straight out of Vanderbilt. Worked at IBM for 12 years in a variety of roles, from technical roles to financial analyst, and then ended up in sales when I was young, actually working with HCA here 25 years ago, which was a great experience as a young person on the IBM team working with HCA. And in those days, HCA and IBM had a very strategic relationship. Tommy Frist was on IBM's board. IBM's CEO was on HCA's board. So I was young and in the middle of all of that, and that was a lot of fun. One day, somebody came to me at IBM and said, I just saw you facilitate a meeting. You need to be in consulting. And I didn't know what a consultant was and had no idea that I would even fit in the consulting business. But I said, sure, I'll try it. So I moved over into the consulting business and fell in love with it and really knew that that's what I wanted to do with my career. And so I actually tell young people today to take a job, learn, go to the next one, learn, and you end up finding really your niche. So I found my niche, began to consult, headed up a workflow consulting practice for IBM for about 5 years and loved it. But I was traveling and taking on more and more responsibility, bigger and bigger projects, traveling on an airplane instead of in a car, and I had young kids. So I decided that after 12 years at IBM, it was time to make a different choice, and really that caused me to start my first business. I left IBM, started a consulting company here in Nashville with a business partner who was at IBM as well. So we both left. We started a company here, and we were 50-50 business owners. Grew that business for 9 years, and then a little over 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to sell out of that business and start C3. So I've really just been in three places. C3 is 5 years old. We have about 50 employees in the business today, and our niche is really to help companies get through change. So we bring, it's a little unique. We have 50 leaders in the business, so we don't have any followers. They're all leaders. They all have a lot of scars, typically 15 to 30 years of experience. They've got business savviness. They've also got tech savviness and a lot of great analysis, problem-solving skills. And they go in and they help companies get from point A to point B, getting through change. Could be a business process change, could be a merger or acquisition, could be a technology implementation. So that's a little bit about C3, and we continue to do that kind of work focused in Nashville: healthcare, insurance, financial services, distribution, manufacturing, education, healthcare, I said, and government across industries. So that's a little bit about C3, and mainly my choice to become an entrepreneur was lifestyle oriented, and love what I do, and hope to continue to consult for many years to come. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate that. And we're going to hear more. Sherry, will you tell us a little bit about your company, another rock star entrepreneur?
Thank you. Well, where Paula describes herself as a reluctant entrepreneur, I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't even know the word until maybe 2 years before I became one. But I moved to Nashville to pursue a career in music, and since I can't sing, that didn't last very long.
That's funny.
I think I was just smart enough to recognize it, though, and so I began a career in sales, and I did really well in sales and ended up working for a company that does exactly what I do now. They just didn't share my philosophy about customer service or taking care of the employees, and so I became a professional apologist, which is not a good way to live. All day, every day, all I did was apologize to customers. And so in frustration one day, and not knowing what I didn't know, I quit. Went to Goodwill and bought 2 file cabinets and set them up in my basement and put an old door across those file cabinets and set up shop for Letter Logic. That was just 9 years ago. And our company prints and mails statements and invoices for other businesses, focusing primarily on healthcare. So we service hospitals in 43 states, printing and mailing the patient statements. Because I didn't want to end up like my previous employer and make myself an apologist again, I knew I had to have everybody in the company vested in the quality of the service and product that we produce every day. And so from day one, I've made it a very customer-centric, employee-centric business where we tell our customers right up front, before they become customers, you will not come first to us. The employees come first. With the notion that if we take extraordinary care of the employees, they will in turn take extraordinary care of the customer. And it works. I'd like to say that it was original, that I thought of it, but actually I read the book Nuts by Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines, and that was his philosophy, and look how that turned out. So because of that, the company gives 10% of the profits to the employees, is distributed monthly, evenly across the board. Every employee, regardless of their title or their task, gets their even distribution of the profits. We pay for 100% of their medical, dental, disability, and life insurance. We assist everyone with the purchase of their first home, with grants for their down payment or closing costs. We allow the employees to bring their kids and their pets to work. And with school being out the last couple of weeks, it has been a zoo at Letter Logic. But all the employees could come to work, and they were there, and they were happy, and they were productive, and it's a wonderful environment. And we pay the employees by the mile if they walk or bike to work as part of our greening initiative. And that's just a taste of some of the employee benefits we provide that really do create a culture in which everybody at Letter Logic is there because they want to be there. And they come to work every day happy and provide extraordinary service, so that 100% of our clients say they would highly recommend us. And that has led to a company now where we have almost no debt, and we're at $20 million in annual revenue and growing at the pace of about 30% a year.
Great. Wow.
Well, I know I want to hear more about this culture thing, but before we do, Gina, will you tell us about how you founded Gigi's Cupcakes?
Well, I want to work for you. I want to bring my dog and my baby to work.
If you bring the cupcakes, you can come.
Perfect. I started out as, we have a similar story. I was a country singer, and I started singing when I was 7. And I knew I didn't want to work for anyone else. My mom and dad were very independent. They had entrepreneurial spirits. So I was taught and raised just to go for it. And I was raised in a culture, if we failed, we failed. We just pick ourselves up, and we knew God would take care of us. So at 15, I decided I didn't want to work for anyone else. And I was still too young to sing in some of the bars down where I used to live and work for tips, so I decided to open a cleaning company and bought some mops and buckets and brooms and walked about a mile to an assisted living place, and Gigi's Cleaning Company was born. And I would sing at night, and that was in California, in a little farm town in California. And about 16 years ago, I decided to move to Nashville and, try my hand here. And I worked at Red Lobster for a couple years and built up my cleaning clientele here, and then sang at night and Tootsie's and the stage and everything downtown. I think I've sang at every biker bar or old folk home in the country. I mean, really, I've sang in a lot of areas. And my mom and dad would always be in the audience and support me. So my parents have been very supportive. I've been very blessed with that. I retired from music about 5 years ago, and I expanded my cleaning company. And my older brother Steve went to New York City and stood in line at a cupcake shop for 2 hours. And he called me and he's like, "These aren't as good as yours and Mom's. You should open a cupcake shop." Because we've been bakers. My grandma's a baker, my great aunt's a baker. We had bakeries, and my dad had some restaurants. So that was something that was very familiar to me. I think I just learned baking from osmosis through my mom and my grandma. So I took some home recipes that were mine and my grandma's and my great Aunt Ruby's and combined them and decided to start a cupcake business. I went to 4 banks, and they all laughed in my face. I mean, they literally laughed at me. And I had some savings, and I had I was very great credit, debt-free, but they still laughed at me, and they were like, "Cupcakes? Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "No, it's going to work. It's going to work." So what happened was, one of my bankers, he didn't give me a loan, but I had 4 credit cards with a certain bank, and instead of I took out cash advance loans, and instead of doing 20% or 15%, he got them down to 9%, 6%, and I took $100,000 out cash advance loans and started Gigi's Cupcakes down on 19th and Broadway. And when I first opened my doors, I had $33 left on my checking account. And they're like, you have to advertise. And I said, I don't have any money. I have $33. What can I do, stand out with a sign? Which I did. And I wasn't afraid to do that. I still have my cleaning company. So the day before I opened, February 21st, 3 years ago, it'll be our anniversary, February 21st. And I cleaned 3 houses to pay for the plumber. He was at the store waiting for me. And I told him, don't cash the check. There's hardly any money in there. I had 1 week to pay a $4,500 rent, which I've never paid in my entire life, food bill, and my employees. And I opened my doors, and in 1 week, that happened. I got to pay all of that money back for the rent and everything. I had $300 left in my checking account. And my landlord, about 6 months after that, came to me and said, wow, you're really doing well. You should franchise. I'm like, what's a franchise? What do I do? So I started reading about franchising and started franchising. I had $26,000 to franchise with. And today we have 34 stores. And in our Valentine's weekend is our busiest weekend of the year, and our stores combined, we sold 175,000 cupcakes in 4 days. So it was a busy weekend, but I survived it, thank you, Lord. And here we are, we're just growing, and even with the economy, I think the reason why we're doing so well is because people like little luxuries, and they like to come and treat themselves for a $3 cupcake. So that's my story.
And it's a great one. Those are all wonderful stories. Now, the floor is open for questions at any time. I'm going to ask questions until one of you is brave enough to decide you want the microphone. And I think, Jim, are you going to walk around handing the microphone? What I'm hearing is we have reluctant entrepreneurs, accidental entrepreneurs, intentional entrepreneurs, and so on. But I think there's something in common. What do you think drives a person to want to have their own business? And maybe, Gigi, since you were 15 and you knew that, you might be the first to answer.
Guts.
Guts?
Yeah.
I think that's what gets you to do it. But at 15, why were you thinking that you wanted to own your own business as opposed to just go out and get a job, which is what most 15-year-old people think?
I have a very free spirit, and I didn't want to work for anyone else. I wanted to make sure that I worked hard and had that control to be my own boss.
And there are a lot of people who feel the same way, but I think that there's a certain characteristic or there's something in common about entrepreneurs, and I want to get under the skin of that. Beth, what do you think? When people say to you, what do you think are some of the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur? What would you say?
I do think guts is a piece of it for sure. I think a little bit of a calculated risk taker is a piece of it. I think for me, I didn't realize I was in a family of entrepreneurs till I started my first business, and everybody in my family is an entrepreneur, and I didn't really think about it that way. I just thought people were in business, but I think it was the desire to kind of put your own fingerprints on something and have meaning in every activity that you do. When you work for a big corporation, there's a lot of overhead, and there's not necessarily meaning to every day and every moment. When you wake up as an entrepreneur, everything's important, and you can really make choices about what you do every moment. So I think some of those are characteristics, and at least the drive for me to start a business.
Right, good observation. Sherry, any observations in that area? What do you think characterizes a successful entrepreneur? What makes it all work?
Well, I think some people would say that I'm a control freak, and that's why I started the business. But really, it's just the desire to make a difference and to have the power and the ability and the freedom to make positive change in my life and in the lives of others.
And you are quite famous for your culture, and I love to hear about it.
Thank you.
Did you ever get any pushback from a client when you said, I want you to know you're not my first concern, you're second? Did you ever get any pushback?
There's always a little shock on their faces for a few seconds, and then when I start telling them why, across the board they get it. They understand, and later they really appreciate the value of that.
Yeah. And let's talk a minute about borrowing money. It's something you always have to talk about. I borrowed just a little bit of money. I took out a family loan and just went to my father and said, I kind of need a line of credit. What will you give me? And we negotiated a family loan at a very low discount rate. So how did you all each borrow money?
I think we heard a little bit from Gigi. I used some personal savings. So actually when I left IBM, I sold some of my IBM stock, which was helpful, and started a business. The other thing, so I've never borrowed money for either business, which is a little bit unique. Our strategy in both of the businesses was to grow the business one client at a time and one consultant at a time. So we put a little bit of money in for cash flow and then didn't take a salary for a little while and started getting business and grew that incrementally and then grew the cash from there. So that's kind of how I did it.
How many of us didn't take a salary for a little while? Yeah, and
my husband thought I was crazy.
A lot of people in the audience too. Sherry, tell us about did you need to borrow money? How did that go?
I did. I originally needed about $350,000, and I went to several different entities to get that money. The banks wouldn't talk to me at all. But 5 people that I approached said yes, they would give me the money. And I think that the offers they gave me, the strings that were attached to those offers looked more like rope to me than strings. And one person was going to generously allow me to have a $35,000 a year salary, and I could own up to 5% of the company eventually. So it was easy for me to walk away from that. I sold everything I owned that had any value whatsoever, cashed my 401k, changed my lifestyle dramatically, and funded the company till we were at $4 million in revenue before I went back to the bank and said, at that time I needed more than $350,000, and they said, you're still not bankable. But they did take me to venture capitalist here in town who ended up being much more an angel funder who gave me the startup capital, the growth capital to get out of my basement and into the factory that we're now housed in.
So I think we hear a lot of risk takers, but controlled, really measured risk taking. Although that's pretty risky to sell everything you own. That's really a leap of faith. Talk to me about what the most difficult part of starting a business is, or just running a. You're not a small business. Running small businesses or smaller businesses. Gigi, what about you?
I think the most difficult part is finding the right people to work for you, and someone that's like-minded, that you can trust. I think that's been a huge thing. But I've fortunately found some wonderful people that love to bake and love to be in that environment. So I think employees is the #1 thing. If they're not happy when they come in the cupcake shop, or when people come in the cupcake shop and we're selling cupcakes, we're not selling something that's not happy. So that's very important to have, it's very important to have someone that exudes that happiness and wants to have customer service.
Now, how are you going to control that with 34, 35, soon to be 110 franchises? How do you keep control over that? Well,
the way I try to keep control is when someone comes to me for a franchise, I go with my gut on how I feel about them. Most of my franchisees are very successful. They've already had businesses. They're doctors or lawyers or entrepreneurs themselves, and they already understand the work ethic. So I try to choose people that have the same like-mindedness, and they want the same type of people that come on board. So it hasn't been really a problem at all.
Okay.
That we start with the owner. If the owner's passionate and they care, it's important.
Difficult times. What's the most difficult part, Sherry?
I think for me, I don't have a college education, and when I started the company, I went and bought a business plan for dummies and wrote my business plan for that. And I didn't know how to read a P&L. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I really didn't know basic finance. And I knew how to make the money. I knew how to make the sales. But that was, I learned the hard way when a bookkeeper was misappropriating funds, and forced myself to learn the financial side of it. And I know it now. And for a long time, I really shirked the responsibility of being the CEO. I just didn't have the confidence that I could run the company, especially as we started growing and becoming profitable. It was frightening. And so I gave the reins over to a couple of COOs more than once, and then realized ultimately that nobody was better equipped to run the company than I was, and took control, and the company has flourished since then.
Sure. And I can't imagine you not having the confidence. Here she was selling everything she owned to start this business. Oh. Beth, what are the difficult moments?
I think feeling alone, it's easy to feel alone as a CEO of a company. And so I can't believe I started 2 companies. Really, when you leave a big company like IBM and then the next day you're all alone, was pretty scary. So I had a partner in that company. So when I started C3, I was alone again that first day, and quickly added partners to lean on. So those difficult times and those scary moments, I use them as a sounding board, and I think that's really gotten me through the challenges in the business. But there's difficulties tactically and strategically in every business, and to have those trusted partners to lean on is what has carried me along through those difficult times.
I once was at a dinner, a small business dinner, and there was a videotape of the people who were winning awards, and they would ask each entrepreneur, what drives you? And the one I identified with the most, he said, what drives you every day to get up earlier, stay out later, work harder? And the man looked up in the camera and said, fear. And you've got the payroll, you've got, yeah. Any questions in the audience? We have anybody who, yes, we do.
Is there a difference, and if so, what is the difference between female entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs? Other than the obvious.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
I'll give you a thought on that. We actually have a pretty gender neutral partnership. When we first started the company, it was just me. Then we had 2 women, 2 men, and we just added a 3rd woman. So we're pretty gender balanced. And I find that that's very healthy, actually, in our world. We all kind of think differently. I think women tend to multitask more. So I know Sherry better than Gigi, but we're moving fast and juggling a lot of things. And so that may be one thing that makes us different. We tend to handle maybe more in the business. But other than that, I think the gender neutral kind of part is healthy. And I can't think of a specific thing that's different about a man versus a woman in running the business. We may start them for different reasons, I would say.
Sherry, thoughts on the difference?
I think historically it's much harder for women to get funding for their businesses than it is for men. And because of that reason, Ernst & Young started an entrepreneurial winning women program a few years ago to try to help women get finances for their company. I think women in general have a higher EQ, and so we're much better with the relationships and creating culture.
Mm-hmm. And Gigi?
I think all I can say is that you just take the odds of men in business and women in business, and a lot of people don't like to venture out on their own. So there's probably not as many women in their own business because there's just not as many women, out working as there are men, I don't think. But I think it's just taking the basic jump to do it. I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, my observation about that would be that I don't think that there's a difference in a man and a woman entrepreneur, but I do think there's a difference in the way men and women manage and the way men and women communicate, and maybe a little to what Sherry says about the difference in creating cultures. And there's a lot of research on women being more collaborative, which can be good and bad. Sometimes it can be a great driving force, and other times it can be clumsy. So there's good and bad, but my reaction would be it's more along the lines of how they lead differently and manage differently. Any other questions? Yes.
One of the things that I've noticed is that women often are taught to overcome weaknesses. That's part of that multitasking piece. Men are environmentally young, taught to work towards their strengths and to back themselves with those people that fulfill the weaknesses that they have. So we tend to be people pleasers. We tend to try to draw out of people those things that we need, but not have the same skill sets to do it. So I think that's one of the challenges women have is how do you overcome your environmental testing, so to speak, in order to gain the confidence of those men who work towards strengths-based. We tend not to take the strength and come out on the assertive side. So I think that's one of the levelers that goes along with women. I think the other part is the challenge that we have between being active and being productive. that concentration and focus that men are taught environmentally, usually pretty young. Women have a harder time we're very active, but staying focused on being productive, because the minutia, I think, as an entrepreneur, is a big challenge. Is how do you get that creative time in order to solve the problems and challenges that you have in front of you, and not stay so active that you can't concentrate on the bigger pictures. So I think those are some of the keys for women that are a little bit different for the men entrepreneurs.
Great, thank you, Mercedes. Anybody else got another comment from the audience? And yes.
It sounded like that the culture of your business is very important to each of you. And I would suspect that some of that has evolved over time. Would y'all just talk about how you got to where you are?
With the cultures?
Yes.
Well, Sherry, we love hearing about your culture, so why don't you amplify a little on yours, and then we'll move to Gina and Beth.
Just an effort to make everybody in the company feel like it was their company, and to feel vested, and to create a family atmosphere. So we like to view each other as like your favorite cousin, and that's how we treat each other.
I have to ask, does anybody ever bring in like a cat and somebody brings in a dog? I mean, that's what bothers me about Pet Day.
That hasn't happened yet.
Okay, it will. Gigi, want to talk a little bit about growing that culture?
I've never been in a corporate structure, and I've been in Crocs and T-shirt and hair and a ponytail by myself, cleaning people's houses, to Crocs, T-shirt, and an apron. So I've never had that culture, and I think I've had to learn that and develop my skills a little bit better with managing people, because I really haven't had that. But I think that people know that when they come into my bakery, they're baked with love. And so if I exude that, and I let people know that's important to me, and morally and fiscally responsible, and I do what I say, I think people try to follow my lead. I'd like for that to happen.
Right.
And I'm getting better at it every day. I try to.
And sometimes, we have a little stress that when we get there, we're trying to be positive. We're trying to remember to reward somebody every day verbally about their good performance. Yes. But there's this, you forget that you've got the stress of payroll and growth and the bank and everything else, and sometimes we just forget that we are the leaders, and it really has to trickle down from the top.
No, it does.
And we're the role model for the culture. I mean, one of the things that I learned in my first business is that culture comes from the top. And I really didn't have a clue about culture, but I learned a lot during that period, and that was one of the big reasons why I decided to start this business. I wanted to put my fingerprints on it and create a certain culture. We have a very collaborative culture, and maybe that is because we have, I think, 60% women in the business. And sometimes I find now that we've grown up, and we're 50 people, and we need more structure. I said just yesterday, we need a balance, collaboration and decision making. Because you can take that a little too far. And as a woman, and as I want to get everybody collaborating and buying in, but culture is really, really important, and I'd say that's my #1 job.
And I was just going to, now, for a period of time, you were a virtual office.
Yes.
Are you still?
No, we have an office. So we actually ran my business out of my house for the first year and a half. And one day my husband came home and he said, "Would you guys please leave?" And my office manager was in the house. We were working. We were having so much fun. And he comes in and he wants to just relax. So we finally grew up. We used to do our company meetings in my house every month, and it was great fun. But one day we got in there and we were just really snug, and so we.
And your husband said, "Go home."
He said, "Go home, go away, go away." So we actually have a small office in Brentwood now.
Okay.
And looking to grow. We've got some new things on the horizon for this year.
Because one of the things about small business and starting a business is many times we start them out of our home or a basement, and it's hard to grow a culture when everybody's virtual. That's a real mystery to me how you do that. And I think we have a question over here.
You all have grown your business to a certain point. Where do you see yourself going in the future? Are you going to expand more? Are you going to stay to the core of your business? Or what do you see for yourselves going forward?
Gigi?
I'd like to have 100 stores. That's kind of my goal within the next 3 years. And from that, I'm not sure. I'd like to stay on and keep baking it's a passion of mine, so I don't see an exit strategy yet, but I didn't really have an entry strategy, so trying to just wing it.
The question is, do you have one for the baby?
Oh, I do have an exit strategy for the baby. It's called C-section. No, I'm kidding.
Sherry?
Our goal is to be at $100 million in revenue with no debt by 2018, and we are achieving that goal by staying with our core product and expanding into electronic delivery of statements and invoices, which I think will be much more profitable than paper, and also probably setting up a West Coast factory sometime in the next couple of years, simply because that will also enhance our ability to service our clients' needs on the West Coast.
Let me ask you a question, Sherry. During the recent, your business is how old?
9 years.
Okay, so you've been through the recession like I have, like all of us have. What happened with the growth trajectory during that time?
Fortunately, my business is recession-proof, because when things are, or at least recession-resistant, when times are bad, people aren't paying their bills on time, so I'm sending more collection notices. And when times are good, they're spending more money, and so there's more statements going out. So our growth continued the same.
A smart business. Beth?
In terms of plans for the future, that's probably the number one question that people ask me when we're interviewing new people to join the team. And as an entrepreneur, I always kind of act like I'm winging it too. You know, you want to stay nimble, you want to stay flexible, you want to kind of meet the demands of the market in the future. So we don't have any fancy plans to be $100 million in revenue. We really are always trying to grow quality, not necessarily quantity. So it's a little different. We're a boutique consulting firm. We're not planning to add other cities, but we are looking at staying fresh in terms of adding new services and making sure we continue to stay relevant for offering those kinds of new services to our clients. So that's really more about what we're looking at.
And as Jim mentioned about my firm is 23 years old, and you know it has been a little of a roller coaster, but thankfully it hasn't gone like this. It's kind of gone like this. So, and we are also sort of a boutique firm, and the biggest challenge we have is, you know, if you're in this personal services business, which is really what we are, we bill by the hour. It's very challenging for me to know when to add people. Do you add the people before you have the accounts, or do you have add the accounts before you have the people? And if you add the accounts, then you might not service the account as well. But if you add the people, you've got a cash flow issue. So it's a constant challenge. I think we have a question.
You just led into exactly what I was wanting to ask all of you about, and that's how you manage the growth, because my wife started her business 15 years ago, and then I came into it in 99. She started in 96. And, you know, we have grown. We've been, knock wood, about 34 to 37% a year the last 3 years. But how do you manage that? I mean, did you plan to have a corporate structure ahead of time, or is it sort of a reactionary thing? And, you know, how did you grow the management teams? How did you decide when to add the personnel versus the revenues versus, you know, all that?
Right. I'll give a quick answer to that, and then ask the panel to. The way we grow is we grow until we're about to bust. I mean, till there's so much pressure on all the individuals at the firm that they really, you know, they're working 10 hours a day and they just can't do it anymore, and then I let off the steam by adding new people. It's the only way I know to do it. It works, but it's very important to have the culture, to have a good culture, because people could resent that. So you have to factor rewards into that. You have, you know, whether it's through bonus plans or whatever, and you have to pay people for their work. And then you have to give them some time off when you've worked them to a frazzle. And in our business, people get nervous because they say, okay, I don't have anything to do today, oh my gosh. Well, I sometimes have to say, that's okay. You just worked till midnight for the last 3 weeks. Right. It's okay to let off the steam. How do you all manage that?
It's funny that you said that, because that's the way we are. We're very lean. So we grow till we bust and then add. That's a really good way of saying it. As we go through an annual strategic planning process, and then we kind of keep tabs on it throughout the year and watch it and adjust as things change, because it's really hard to predict when you're in the people business. But I recently said to our recruiting arm, your job is the funnel needs to be, the supply needs to always be greater than demand. And then we said to the business development team, your demand always needs to be bigger than supply. And so there's that natural tension there that we've tried to create to help with that. But I think it's really Paula's answer.
We are at the end of the hour, but I want to give both of you an opportunity to answer that question, if you would, just briefly. Sherry?
For years, we were just flying by the seat of my pants, and
and your money.
Yeah, and a couple of times we had to stop sales for 6 months at a time because we had a backlog of sales that we couldn't fulfill. And so we got smart a couple of years ago, hired a corporate strategist who helped us look at what does a $100 million company look like in your space, and how are you going to get there? And now it's very strategic. We're hiring people, looking at them, can you work for a $100 million company in this position? And just being much more strategic about every move.
Great.
That's a great idea.
And Gigi, one last word?
I think that we've grown so quickly in 3 years that I feel like imploded. And we've exploded, but we're imploding. My brother is on the team. My mom helps with all the new recipes that we have. My dad helps with construction. Alan Thompson helps with selling franchises. So we've had to expand, but it's been very scary for me because I'm like, oh, can we afford this? But we have to do it. I mean, you can't not add people to help with corporate structure. So that's been a challenge for me, but I've had to do it as I've exploded and then, grown.
Incrementally, yes. Well, this has been a great panel, and I know you want to join me in thanking them.
I was just thinking while they were talking, we have the complete package. If you're going to start a business, you're going to need a place to incubate it, and eSpaces is the perfect place to come do that. You're going to need consulting, business consulting, and Beth and C3 are here, and you're going to have to build those clients. So Sherry's here. Like Sherry keeps hers happy, you're going to have to feed them cupcakes and keep them happy. And if you want to get that corporate message out, Paula is here. And if you need money, the Bank of Nashville is here. We have the complete package. Let's give them all a hand.